I'm writing this all from my cell phone, so please forgive me if there's any typos whatsoever. I've lived in many different houses, apartments, condos, townhouses, etc. But I guarantee homelessness is a more welcoming experience than ever having to reside at East Holmes Apartments. My name is Abel. I was roughly in my mid-20s when I had finally decided to go back to college and pursue my bachelor's degree. At the time, I was living with my grandmother who, although lonely after my grandfather had recently deceased, realized that having a grandson in their mid-20s living at her place could be annoying. Don't get me wrong, me and my grandmother loved each other as any family would, but I did have some bad habits that would upset, if not outright enrage, my grandmother. Leaving clothes, empty soda cans, and paper plates of unfinished food out on the floor, never making my bed, doing only portions of the chores I was assigned, vacuuming but never reaching the corners, plopping dishes into the dishwasher without pre-rinsing, never taking objects off the shelves when dusting, etc. I can say in hindsight I wasn't that responsible of a human being, so it was decidedly so that I should probably move out my grandmother's and into an apartment. She was kind enough to cover the costs of living so long as it didn't exceed a certain amount and that I would complete my degree in full this time. With the housing crisis being a top issue during the time, finding a place to live was not easy. Fortunately, after a good month of searching, I did manage to find a one-bedroom complex that was desperately seeking new tenants. Extra discount for students caught my attention, but realizing it had electric, water, and garbage completely covered at a fixed rate, temperature control, and air conditioning for only $750 a month. Yes, in total. I figured there had to be some kind of catch. The only one I could find was that its deposit was also $750, along with first and last month's rent, and that I'd need to sign a 1-year lease. And I guess a little crack in the wall next to the fridge, but they assured me they'd have that fixed by the time I was ready to move in. Honestly, with a deal like that, who wouldn't take up this place? I mean, it had everything I'd ever need. A bedroom with a big walk-in closet, a fairly sizable living room to fit multiple furniture, a bathroom that I could take more than 5 steps in without feeling claustrophobic, a kitchen with a view into the living room for when I wanted to cook and watch TV at the same time. It even had a little fireplace I rarely used, but the aesthetics were nice. And best of all, it was both close to the college I was attending and my girlfriend's place. When I finally moved in and got everything out of their boxes and settled, I plopped my happy ass onto the couch and just admired the view of my living room. There was a big window that showed a view of the rest of the apartment, fellow tenants in their own buildings living their own lives. A big cherry blossom tree that somehow reached the top of the 3rd floor, which is where I resided. Birds chirping, squirrels chittering, kids playing, people walking their dogs. Fuck, dude, I sighed euphorically. I don't even want to leave this place. Too bad, nerd, my girlfriend Sophie said as she playfully threw a stuffed animal at my face. School ain't gonna teach you shit unless you actually attend. Sophie was the most beautiful girl I had ever known. She was a little tomboyish, short red hair, freckles on her cheeks, and absolutely playful in every way she could be. I don't know what she saw in me, but whatever it was, I'm just glad it attracted her enough to have her hazel green eyes always pierce into me. Doesn't class start for you in like half an hour though? I said, as I scratched the chin of my pet cat Hades. Yeah, and? That's literally the amount of time it's gonna take for you to get there if you leave right now. She walked over, kicking legs in a dramatic march with each step, with her hands behind her back. It's also the amount of time we could... She plopped down, half sitting on me. You know. Suffice to say, my first day of living here was awesome. College started. The girl of my dreams would visit me often, my cat being my other companion on rainy days, a wonderful 1-bedroom experience, paradise. But those delightful memories reside in a coffin now, and inside they decay each day, molding into nightmares of what will live and die with me. A few months later, my grandma had become ill, and I wasn't sure how long she would be around for. She reassured me she would still fund me throughout the remainder of my college years. I know it's irresponsible of me, but I couldn't attend the next quarter. I was depressed. My only family member left in my life, slowly dying out. I know I had Sophie, but life without the one person I grew up with felt like the weight of a reality I never thought I'd face this soon. I'd be the only one left in my family line. No Thanksgivings or Christmases, no summer gatherings, no small talks or even I love you or I'm so proud of you from a figurehead anymore. I couldn't tell her I wasn't attending college at the moment, so I kept sending emails and calling on the occasion, acting like everything was fine. Then one night, my life ended and a new one began. It was almost 1 a.m. when I heard a knocking on my door. This, of course, would startled my cat since the door was thick but hollow and would echo throughout the apartment no matter how gently you knock. As he bolted under the bed, I got up groggily, shaking my head to wake myself up. I got dressed up in a bathrobe and made my way out of my room, past the kitchen and over to the door. There was a weird smell I couldn't quite put my finger on. I looked through the dirty, blurry peephole of my door, only to see the same light bulb that shined just bright enough to barely show the outside world. No one was there. Goddamn kids. I never thought I'd mutter that to myself at my age. It's all right, Hades, just some stupid little bastards. My cat would always let out a long humming meow from his throat. It's kind of a silly meow, but that's just how he always sounded. A few minutes later, he came out from under the bed and hopped into my lap on the couch as we watched some old movies I grew up with. It's not like I could sleep anyways. But again, I heard a knock at my door. Hades froze and looked wide-eyed at the door. I swear to God. I got up and quietly made my way to the door. I looked out the peephole again and there was, in fact, a kid just standing there, barely able to be seen. I unlocked the deadbolt and the doorknob and pulled it wide open, looking down at the, I assume, barely 10-year-old boy who had knocked on my door. "Excuse me, sir," he said shyly to me. "Can you help me? My mom won't open the door." I blinked and shook my head a little in disbelief. Where do you live?" I'm not gonna lie, I was extremely annoyed. Why did this kid pick my door to knock on? "Over there." He pointed to the other side of the complex. I stared at the direction for a few seconds, then slowly back to the kid. "Is there nobody else over there?" "There is, but I'm scared." He rocked back and forth nervously. "What, like crossing the street scared, or I'm really scared, mister?" I cursed under my breath. I wanted to just close the door on him, but what if he really needed help? That weighed on me for a sec. But then again, what if he was pulling a prank on me? He looked up at me dead in the eyes and said, "Please." I sighed. "Okay, just hang on a minute." I closed the door and went to my bedroom to dress in normal attire. Every limb I put through the holes of my clothes I did with a forceful push, out of pure irritation. This has to be a prank, right? As I put my shirt on, I reached for my little switchblade I kept on the dresser beside my bed and put it in my back pocket. I figured he was just going to take me to the apartment next door. I'd get hit with some cold water balloons, and he'd run off with his little friends into the night like the little assholes they are. There were reports of kids doing that a good week or so ago, so I figured why wouldn't I just give them a little scare if it actually was a prank. I opened the door, and the kid was waiting there patiently, yet nervous. "Okay, kid, lead on." We crossed the street to the other side of the complex. We climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, and as I was taking my last few steps to reach the top, I noticed something peculiar about the place. All the lights were on and all the window curtains were open. It's not like the kid couldn't just bang on the window and go unnoticed or anything. I looked through the windows, observing the nice furniture and plants on top of an antique-looking table. But I also saw a woman with her back towards us. She was in a white nightgown, with long, dark black hair, and was really tall. A little too tall, I thought. I took a few steps towards the door, passing by the furniture that partially blocked my view of the woman, and as I did, I realized she wasn't actually that tall at all. She was standing on a chair. I felt like I made a weird face of intrigue, but also concern, and the kid must have noticed. She won't listen to me, he said in quiet frustration, likely wanting to scream as he pressed his hands and face against the window. He did eventually yell to her, though. Mommy, mommy! She didn't move. I got closer to the glass and knocked on it. Hey, lady, you okay? She stiffened up a little, then turned her head ever so slightly. I couldn't see her face, but I could see something else that made my gut tighten. Fibers around her neck, a rope. Whoa, okay, hold on, don't move. As I was about to sprint my way to the door, I saw her inch closer towards the edge of the chair. I tried to open the door, but of course it was locked. I did the only thing I could think of doing and started bashing whole body shoulder first into the door. The kid was crying, wailing. Mommy, please, I want in. Why won't you let me in? He started banging on the windows, which gave me an idea. I made my way over to the kid and told him to stand back. I ran full sprint into the window, only to discover that the door was probably my better option. I don't know what these windows were made out of, but it felt like I ran straight into a wall of cement. Fuck! I screamed as I fell to the floor, clutching my shoulder as I felt like I had nearly fractured it. Mommy, please! He yelled over and over again. I regained my composure after a little bit of groaning and pain, and when I got up, I saw her take a step off the chair. Shit! I ran back to the door and started kicking it over and over again. I was sweating and panicking, but I just kept kicking. I noticed it loosened a little bit, and I took a few steps back. I ran as hard as I could and with full force threw my body into the door. It opened, and I fell through. I was laying on the floor, some of my own blood running down my face. I brought my head up, blinking off the pain. I pushed myself up slowly to my feet, small splinters of wood falling off of me as I looked around. My eyes widened in confusion. There wasn't any furniture, no tables, no chair, no woman. Just a cold, dead air and moonlight hitting the surfaces of an abandoned kitchen next to a dark living room. What the fuck? I stood there for a good minute, noticing that not only was the apartment empty, but the countertops were dusty and there was a weird aroma in the air, something that smelled like honey and gasoline. I started to step back out of the apartment. Hey kid. I turned to see nobody standing there, just a long, empty path leading back to the stairs. My arm was twitching, both from pain and an uneasiness. I wished this was just a very elaborate prank, but nothing made any sense. I felt something brewing within me. My lungs. I was hyperventilating. Lights from the neighbors turned on. In a brief daze, I felt like moving was impossible. Then I heard a voice. Hey, is everything all right out there? I panicked. I bolted down the stairs, running as fast as I could across the street over to my building and ran back up into my apartment, locking the door and slamming my back into it. As I slid down, sitting there in silence, my cat came over to me. Still trying to process everything that had just happened, I hadn't even noticed that he was meowing his long, weird humming meow and had put a paw on my leg. Hades. I reached out to pet him, his face about to rub into my hand when out of nowhere, all of his hair stood up and he swiped at my hand, scratching it, and darted off under the bed, hissing the entire time. I winced and recoiled my hand, gripping it tight. I must have smelled weird or something because he had never done that before. I got to my feet, and the next thing I knew, I was drowsy and felt incredibly weak. The room began to spin as a building nausea started to take over. I guess the adrenaline was wearing off. I fell onto my couch and slept the whole night through. You brought a switchblade with you? Sophie exclaimed in shock. It was the next day in the afternoon, and I had called her over to vent my guts out. Dude, did you not hear the part about the apartment being empty? Well, yeah, that's obviously weird, but it's fucked up that you would even bring a knife with you to scare off some kids. Don't you remember about the old guy that chased me and my friends with a baseball bat? He didn't hurt us. That doesn't mean you go out actively traumatizing kids. Just because you had a fucked up childhood doesn't mean you have to inflict it on others. She had a point there. Okay, but... She brought her hand up to her hair, brushing it back a little. You're not making up the rest of it? I'm dead serious, I replied. There was nobody there, not even the kid. So that means you found a haunted apartment, right? I don't know. Maybe? I got up to go to the kitchen and make a bowl of cereal. She followed behind me and leaned against the wall. You're gonna call an exorcist or something? Maybe a little voodoo doctor to teach you how to dance it away? She smirked. Yep, I fucking knew you'd do that. I grabbed my spoon and headed back into the living room. What's that supposed to mean? You know what that means. I open my guts up about something horrifying and you just act like it's a big joke. I stabbed my cereal with the spoon, trying to soak up the milk into each piece. Well, duh. Do you expect me to just believe something that ridiculous? She pranced on over and sat next to me. Look, I'm not saying you didn't see anything, but maybe you ran into the wrong door or something. I just don't know. I let out a stressful sigh and dropped my spoon on the floor. First my grandma is dying and now I potentially live next to a goddamn haunted apartment. I kicked the table. I mean, what the fuck? Am I losing it or something? Sophie wrapped her arms around me and pulled my head into her chest. She leaned back slowly, convincing my body to lay on top of hers as she combed my hair. She kissed the top of my head and said, Maybe we can go over later tonight just to see what's going on. Suddenly there was a knocking at my door. We both stared at the door, then at each other. Shit, I whispered. I got up and took a look out the peephole. There were 2 police officers standing right outside the door. I looked over to Sophie, quietly mouthing, What do I do? She raised her arms up, shrugging but with just as much panic as I had, and mouthed back, I don't know. I took a deep breath. Fuck it, I gotta be responsible. I opened the door and asked how I could help them. Sir, there were reports about an attempted breaking and entering last night, and we just thought we'd come in and ask you a few questions, the officer said. I looked to Sophie. She shook her head slowly, wide-eyed. I think I need to take a rain check on that. It would only take a minute of your time, sir, the officer interrupted. If you'd like, you can step out here to talk, if that would be more comfortable. I hesitated for a second, then nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind me. So, what's up? The officer next to him pulled out a notepad. They had told me that there had been a loud banging noise at the other apartment complex, but when one of the neighbors went to check, nobody was there. Apparently, there weren't any witnesses around either, so they started to ask everybody on this side of complex if they had seen anything. Thank God. I was in the clear. No, I didn't see anything last night, officer. Well, give us a call if you have any information later that could help. The officers nodded, wished me a good day, and walked off. But halfway down the stairs, one of the officers looked up at me. Oh, we forgot to ask, did you happen to notice any foul odor coming out of your apartment? I froze, then shook my head slowly. No, just smells like it always does. All right, you have yourself a good day. They finally took off. The rest of my day was spent watching movies with Sophie, playing with Hades and eating a nice roast she made with some spare ingredients I had left. She offered to stay the night, but I knew she had to study up for finals week and I couldn't bear to selfish. When she left, I decided to give my grandma a call. She didn't answer, but I assumed that since it was nighttime, she was most likely sound asleep. I knew I likely wasn't going to get much sleep tonight, so I decided to make a bowl of Sophie's roast and heat it up in the microwave. There came a gentle knocking at my door. Hades' ears went up and he stared straight at the door. I went over to him and gave him some gentle pets. I'm proud you didn't run away this time, I chuckled at him. I figured Sophie had forgotten something, so as I went to look through the peephole, my heart stopped for a second to see something else. It was hard to see, the light was dimmer than usually, but from what I could make out, there was a hunched short figure with gray hair and a red scarf around their neck. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me for a sec, then they spoke. Abel? Sweetie, are you there? It was my grandmother's voice. I was relieved to hear her gentle old voice again. Oh my God, Grandma. Hey, yeah, give me a sec. I unlocked the deadbolt from the door, but just as I was about to unlock the one on my doorknob, it started to shake violently. I know I'm not the brightest person in the world, but it really did take me a minute to process what was happening. I know my grandma is sick. She may be able to still do her chores and drive around. But I live on the other side of the state and it's almost midnight. That is not my grandma out there, and I am stupid to have thought for a second it was her. No matter how much hope I try to give myself in this world, I knew that the person out there wasn't her.
Sweetie?
She rattled the doorknob harder.
Sweetie, Abel, let me in.
I probably shouldn't have spoke, but being silent didn't feel right either. Who are you?
Your grandma. It's cold out here.
All right. If this person was going to fuck with me, I was going to fuck with them right back. I reached for my baseball bat I had kept behind the couch and put my hand on the doorknob, ready to open it. "What you doing all the way out here?" I asked, in as calm of a voice as I could.
I just want to see you one last time, sweetie,
she said, with the last word being somewhat spoken in a lower, shaky cadence, almost like coughing it out. I stopped for a second, my heart beating 1,000 miles an hour. There was something in my gut telling me to not look through that peephole again. I swallowed my breath and slowly put my eye to it. I retracted immediately. There were teeth, jagged yellow and somewhat brown in decay. The mouth was wide open, but it didn't just have a top and bottom row of teeth. It had teeth everywhere. Then I fell back as a weight smashed into my door, knocking me right onto the floor.
Open!
The voice sounded like it was trying to scream out, but was inhaling at the same time.
Open, open, open!
I crawled backwards into the kitchen, hiding behind the countertops as it slammed harder into the door. The whole apartment felt like it was breaking around me, and when I looked up at the ceiling, I saw some cracks forming with each slam. I covered my head as what felt like debris fell on me, dropping my bat in the process. Then it all stopped. No slamming on the door, no weird sounds, just a dead calm quiet, similar to the one at the other apartment. Then I heard a long humming meow come out from under the bed in my bedroom. Hades must be absolutely terrified, and I know he needs me. I rushed towards him and saw his tail sticking out of the bed. I was relieved to know he was okay. I got down on my knees to comfort him. "Hey Hades, it's okay, buddy." As I gently pet his backside, I felt something was off. I pulled back my hand and looked at it. His hair was coming off of him and sticking onto my hand in black, bloody clumps. There was a loud, sudden rumbling that knocked me onto my back. My bed was violently shaking and lifting off the ground. There was something growing underneath it that let out a low, gurgling attempt at a meow. I screamed and jumped up, running out of the room and slamming the door shut. What the fuck was going on? It rammed against my bedroom door, trying desperately to pry it open. I heard scratching against the doorknob and I ran to the living room back to the door. I was about to open it when a loud slam came from the living room door again. Everything felt like it was falling off the shelves. I tried to get my breath under control, but I just couldn't. Then suddenly, the door in the living room slammed open. I ran like hell to the bathroom, hearing wet, sludge-like thumping noises hit the floor, trying to catch up to me. I shut the door as hard as I could and held onto the doorknob for dear life. It had hit itself against the door for a moment, then rapidly tried to throw its weight through it again and again. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, hoping the neighbors next door would hear it, hoping someone would call the police, the military, anyone. It kept trying to open the door, but just somehow couldn't do it. This felt like it was going on for hours, until finally it stopped again. My hands were gripped so tight on the doorknob I felt like they had melted into it. I couldn't let go, even with the stabbing pain that was shooting up my arms. I took in long, deep breaths, but no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't calm my thrashing heart. I did nothing but try to breathe for who knows how long. Then it spoke.
Open.
It sounded like it wasn't speaking with its throat anymore. There was a sloshing sound when it spoke, almost like its organs were squeezing together to make its own voice somehow.
Open!
It smacked the door once. "Please just go away," I cried, my teeth now grinding in to the point where I could feel the canines ripping into my cheek. It became quiet for a while. I wasn't sure what it was planning, but it slowly sloshed away from my door and down the hallway. It spoke slowly as it got further away.
Sophie!
My spine shot up. How does it know about her? I let go of the doorknob and reached into my pocket, pulling out a cell phone with just enough battery left. I searched my contacts and called up Sophie. It rang a few times. Then there was an answer. Hey, I'm glad you... Sophie, listen to me. I cut her off. There is something in my apartment. I don't know what it is, but I need you to stay the hell away from here. For a moment, there was a gentle fuzz that hummed on the phone during that silence. Your door is open. I heard the sloshing sound again, this time moving faster down the hallway, towards the living room. Sophie, get out! The phone line disconnected. I dropped my phone. Everything went silent again. There were tears running down my cheeks. I stood in that bathroom for so long, looking down at the doorknob. It got her. It got Hades. It's going to get me eventually. I wanted to open that door. I wanted it to end me. I couldn't stand here anymore with this agony. And yet, I was too petrified to do anything. Every time I reached for the door, I retracted, trembling with what felt like fractured fingers. I was just too scared. I did the only next thing I could think. I walked over to the toilet, sat down on the seat, stared at the door, and waited. Bloodshot, trembling, breaking apart, I waited. Hours must have passed by. It must think I was still holding the door closed. I was getting frustrated. Why wouldn't it just come in? I'm not going to get away from it, so why not just get it over with? Then I remembered something. My phone was still alive. It didn't have more than 20% battery left. But it wouldn't take more than a few seconds to call 911 and tell them something was going on. They have to send someone. I just gotta convince them to get over here without sounding crazy. I picked up the phone and called them. It took a minute, but they answered. 911, what is your emergency? Hey. I took a breath in, trying to keep myself calm. I just heard a bunch of noises outside, and I don't know if it's gunshots or not. Can you send someone over to check? Of course. What is your location? I raised my clenched fist to my chest in silent victory. I'm at East Holmes Apartments. My address is 114. Dial tones. I blinked. I looked at my phone. 19% battery left. Did they just hang up on me? I don't know how much more pounding my chest can take, but my whole body began to quiver. I couldn't take it anymore. I don't know what the fuck was going on, what that thing was, or why they'd hang up on me, but I knew at that moment that staying in this bathroom wasn't getting me anywhere. I wanted to die before, but now, out of spite, I just wanted answers, and I was willing to die for that. I turned my phone off and shoved it into my pocket. I took dreaded but careful steps towards the door. As I placed my hand on the knob, I hesitated to turn it. There's nothing left to live for, I thought to myself. Just get it over with. I turned the knob and opened the door. No one was there, but I heard screaming in the distance. Cautiously, I made my way down the hall, observing every corner and crack I passed. When I got to the kitchen, I saw my bat on the ground next to some debris that had fallen on me. I also realized that there was a strong stench in the kitchen. I followed it towards a wall where I saw a crack that was covered up by some fresh paint. It smelled of honey and gasoline. I coughed after inhaling too much, my vision blurring a little as I stumbled over to my bedroom. The door was open. Aside from some bloody clumps of hair, Hades was nowhere to be seen. I don't know if I was exaggerating earlier, but only half of the things that were on shelves had fallen on the ground. But the door was wide open, and outside lied a mutilated corpse. Sophie? I wobbled over to the body, my legs giving up halfway. I crawled towards the body to get a closer look, but I just couldn't make out a face, let alone a body type, with all the blood, entrails, and the contorted tearing of the face. It didn't help that my vision was also going in and out. Suddenly, I heard a voice ahead. Where's my boy, Phyllis? Where's my boy, Phyllis? Where's my boy, Phyllis? There was a man, roughly middle-aged, facing a door, repeating the same thing over and over again. It looked like he was trying to walk through the door somehow, his legs pushing his body flat into it. I turned as I remembered there was screaming earlier. There was still screaming, all right. Everyone was screaming. Across the complex, there were people partially mutilated, yelling and screaming random words over and over again. Some were walking back and forth. Some were hanging off the balcony. Some even fell off the balcony. Men, women, and children just screaming and repeating the same things over and over again. I barely managed to get myself up as I stumbled towards the stairway, slowly making my way down to the ground floor and stepping out into the sunlight. I took a few steps forward to another individual who had their arm raised over and behind their head, fiercely beating the back of the neck to the point where the nails were ripping out flesh. I wanted to ask what was going on. "Sophie?" I said. "Sophie?" I said again. I couldn't speak any other words. I was losing track of my thoughts. My motor skills were all over the place. Sometimes I could feel my limbs. Sometimes I couldn't feel anything. I felt almost like a puppet on strings. I tried to force myself to walk, but ended up tripping over my feet and onto the ground. I saw in front of me a bunch of dirt and grass, and out of a knee-jerk reaction, started shoveling it into my mouth, chewing and crunching the dirt and rocks. Blood was coming out of my mouth. There was glass in it too. I don't know why I had no control, but I dreaded every minute of it. I kept saying Sophie over and over through the dirt and glass, but in my head, I was screaming for God to kill me. Car doors slammed shut, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw white blotchy figures, shining from the sun's rays, heading towards me. They grabbed my arm, wiped the dirt from my mouth, and put a mask on my face. Before I passed out, I realized they were all wearing hazmat suits. I woke up in a room of ice cream white walls, tied to medical bed. There were needles and tubes inside me. I didn't have the strength to get up, let alone move. Eventually, the nurses and a doctor came in. They were saying so much that I couldn't quite make it all out. It seemed they were just checking my vitals and making sure I was okay. Another man came into the room shortly after. He wore a black suit and tie and was holding a folder. He asked for everyone to leave after they were done double-checking everything about me. He sat in a chair next to me, looking down at me with what I could only describe as pity. "If you can speak, I would very much like to talk to you." He kept the folder in his lap, placing a hand on it so as to not let it slip out. So, I had to concentrate. That's quite all right, son," he sighed disappointingly. He opened the folder and pulled out some pictures. "All I need from you is to either nod for yes or shake for no. Can you do that for me?" I nodded. "All right then." He put one of the pictures in front of my face. "Do you recognize this person at all?" There was a little girl on it. She wore a red and white polka-dotted dress and was smiling. I shook my head. He briefly blew air out of his nose. He held another picture to me. "How about this person?" A man right around my age. He had long, slicked-back hair, wore a biker jacket and sunglasses, and was smoking a cigarette outside a bar. I shook my head. He went on to show me more and more pictures of people I didn't know, until he got to one picture. He showed me a picture of Sophie. She was standing outside of an apartment complex with a cell phone in her hand. I nodded. "Excellent." He took the pictures back and stood up. "I know you must have a lot of questions, but I assure you that the only thing that matters right now is your own well-being. We don't know exactly how long it'll take to get you fully recovered, but everyone here is top-of-the-line certified." He pat my shoulder. "You rest easy there, son." That's exactly what I did. I stayed in that bed for weeks, trying to get my body to move and function the way it could before. They had me take these sort of aptitude-like tests to try to get me to say things like dog or cat. I just couldn't say anything at the time. I finally had shown some progress towards the end of the month. I was speaking almost completely normally, despite some stuttering here and there. I could also move my arms and hold about the weight of a small box of marbles. As time went by, I managed to get the strength back to even walk around, albeit poorly, with an IV bag stand. It took me a while to get around, but fortunately, I managed to make my way over to where they had hidden my clothes and items. I plucked out my cell phone and just barely managed to sneak off with it before anyone could find out. As I was writing this whole thing out, The man in black had come back to visit me once again, folder in hand and everything. He sat in the same chair next to me. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Good enough," I replied. He smiled lightly and looked down, grabbing a couple of pictures from the folder and laying them on my lap. They were all pictures of Sophie. "We have multiple witness testimonies saying that she was here when the gas leak occurred," he said. "Some even say she would come by to your place for a visit every now and again." I looked up at him. Where? "That, we do not know, son," he interjected. "We were hoping you could tell us that." I shook my head. "She's been missing for a while now. We've been putting on a full investigation to find the victims that had been around the area at the time of the gas leak. They could be suffering from neurotoxicity, delusions, lack of motor skill functions." He put the photo back into the folder and pulled out another one. "Deformations." I gagged when I saw it, a blob-like pile of human flesh, bone, hair, and organs all merged into one, puncturing out and over each other. Faces twisted and assimilated together, some eyes connected into one another with multiple pupils forming. I closed my eyes and looked away from the picture. The man put it back into his folder. "The doctors are going to have a word with you now." He stood from his chair and walked towards the door. I can only hope it'll be good news at this point. Thoughts raced inside my head as the doctors made their way to me. Was I going to become that? Did Sophie become that? What about Hades? What kind of gas leak could possibly do this? The cells in me are stable for now, but they could also likely grow at a rapid rate similar to that of cancer cells in every part of my body. I don't know what they're going to do to me, and I don't know how long I have left to live for. Just know this: never go to East Holmes Apartments.